The crosshair settled on Chief Wyatt Callahan's temple. Through the magnified Schmidt and Bender optic of the Mk-22 advanced sniper rifle, Kira Thorne could see individual beads of sweat rolling down the side of his face. Despite the minus 18 degrees Celsius, despite the thin air at 11,400 feet, she could see the tension in his jaw as he prepared to kick the door. She could see the exact spot where the .338 Lapua Magnum round would enter his skull if her hand twitched even a fraction of an inch to the left. Her finger rested on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure, then 3. The rifle wanted to fire. Her training wanted her to fire. Center mass, controlled pairs, eliminate the threat. Except Chief Wyatt Callahan wasn't the threat. He was walking into one. Kira forced her breathing to slow, forced the crosshair to drift 6 inches to the right, forced herself to aim at the stone doorframe instead of the man she was supposed to be protecting. The man who had spent the last 6 months trying to drive her out of the teams. The man who had told her to her face that she was a political stunt, a diversity hire, a liability that would get real operators killed. Now she was about to save his life by nearly taking it. The wind screamed across the Hindu Kush Ridge at 20 knots, trying to shove the bullet off course before it even left the barrel. The cold had stopped being painful an hour ago. Now it was just a numbing void that made her fingers feel like wooden blocks wrapped around the rifle's pistol grip. Through the scope, Chief Callahan's boots started to rise. The kick was coming. In 3 seconds, he would breach that door. In 4 seconds, the pressure plate explosive wired to the frame would detonate. In 5 seconds, the belt-fed machine gun positioned in the hallway beyond would open fire into the fatal funnel where Callahan and his entire stack would be packed like sardines. Kira didn't have 5 seconds. She had now. But before the trigger broke, before the shot that would change everything, there was a voice in her ear. A memory from 32 years ago, carried across decades on the wind of a different mountain, a different war. Master Chief Boone Mackenzie's voice, rough as gravel over broken glass. I've seen this before. Mogadishu, October 3rd, 1993. And that time, the girl died. 48 hours earlier, the briefing room at Bagram Airfield smelled like burnt coffee and the particular anxiety that comes from men preparing to walk into harm's way. Kira sat in the back row, her operational folder open but unread. She had learned during her first month with SEAL Team 7 that sitting in the back meant fewer eyes on her, fewer opportunities for the casual comments that felt like paper cuts, death by 1,000 dismissals. Admiral Thomas Hendricks stood at the front of the room, his silver hair immaculate even in a combat zone. Behind him, satellite imagery of a valley system in the Tora Bora region glowed on the projector screen. Kira recognized the terrain, limestone ridges, cave complexes, the kind of place where you could hide an army or lose one. Gentlemen, Hendricks began, then caught himself with the practiced ease of someone who had been through media training. And Petty Officer Thorne, what I'm about to tell you is classified top-secret code word. Operation Crimson Eagle is a joint task force action to recover stolen Russian tactical nuclear devices, specifically RA-115 suitcase nukes, small enough to fit in a backpack, large enough to level 6 city blocks. The room went silent. Nuclear weapons had a way of doing that. Hendricks clicked to the next slide. A grainy photograph of a bearded man in traditional Afghan dress, but the eyes were wrong, too light, too Western. Intelligence indicates these devices are being brokered by an unknown Western operator, former military, Tier 1 background. He's been ghost for 10 years, operating in the shadows, selling expertise in hardware to the highest bidder. His current clients are a splinter cell with ties to Al-Qaeda remnants. Hendricks paused, letting that sink in. This operator has Delta Force credentials, likely served during Cold War operations. 1880s Soviet-Afghan conflict. We're not just fighting terrorists, gentlemen. We're hunting one of our own who went rogue. Another click. Topographical maps, elevation markers, range cards. The target compound is here. Former Soviet listening post, repurposed by local warlords. Our ground element, Bravo team, will conduct a direct action raid to secure the devices. Time on target is 0300 local. Insertion via MH47 at this Lima Zulu, 8 clicks out. He pointed to a ridge that looked like God had taken a knife to the mountains. Overwatch will be established here. Overwatch team will consist of 2 personnel, a spotter and a sniper. Their job is to provide cover for Bravo's approach and neutralize any threats that emerge during the breach. Kira felt the weight of attention shift. She didn't look up from her folder. Master Chief Mackenzie will serve as spotter and tactical advisor. Petty Officer Thorne will be primary sniper. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from focused attention to something else. Something that felt like doubt made audible through the absence of sound. Chief Wyatt Callahan raised his hand. He didn't wait to be called on. Sir, with respect, is it wise to put an untested operator in a critical Overwatch position? Thorne's only been with the team for 6 months. She hasn't been blooded. Admiral Hendrix's expression didn't change, but Kira saw his jaw tighten. Petty Officer Thorne graduated first in her sniper class. She holds the current base record for cold bore accuracy at 1,500 meters. She is the most qualified shooter available for this operation. On a range, Callahan pressed. With all due respect to Thorne's qualification scores, a range is not the same as combat. When rounds start coming back at you, when the pressure is on, we need someone we can count on not to freeze. Kira kept her eyes on the satellite imagery. She had learned not to engage. Engagement meant emotion. Emotion meant proving them right, that women were too emotional for this work. A voice cut through the tension. Gravel over broken glass. Callahan. Master Chief Boone Mackenzie stood near the door, arms crossed over a chest that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains they'd be operating in. 61 years old, 5 deployments across 3 decades. The lines on his face were a roadmap of every hard decision he'd ever had to make. And there were a lot of lines, but he said nothing more. Just stood there, watching. And in that silence, Kira felt something she couldn't quite name. Not support exactly, more like calculation, like a man watching a high-stakes poker game and deciding whether to bet. Admiral Hendrix cleared his throat. Master Chief Mackenzie brings up an excellent point by his presence alone. This operation was designed around the specific skill sets of the personnel assigned. Thorne's long-range precision capabilities are exactly what we need for this terrain. Bravo team will be exposed during their approach. Overwatch is their insurance policy. He clicked to the next slide. Rules of engagement. ROE is restrictive. This is technically sovereign Afghan territory. We are operating under the umbrella of ongoing peacekeeping operations, but we cannot be seen as the aggressors. Do not fire unless fired upon. Do not engage unless you have positive identification of hostile intent. This is a scalpel, not a hammer. We get in, we secure the packages, we get out. The world never knows we were there. Kira finally looked up from her folder. The satellite imagery showed more than the Admiral was saying. The compound wasn't just a repurposed listening post. The defensive positions were too good, the sightlines too carefully managed. Someone with training had turned that valley into a killing ground. She raised her hand. Hendrix nodded. Thorne. Sir, the thermal imaging from the last pass. Can we pull that up? A moment of hesitation. Then the Admiral clicked back 3 slides. The compound appeared in shades of gray and white, heat signatures blooming like flowers against the cold stone. Kira stood, moving to the front of the room. She was aware of every eye on her, aware that this was a test within a test. She pointed to a cluster of heat signatures on the western ridge. These signatures here, they're uniform, spaced exactly 40 meters apart. That's not random sentry placement. That's professional interval for interlocking fields of fire. She traced her finger along the valley floor. In this pattern here, the way the snow's been disturbed, it's too regular. That's not foot traffic. That's deliberate concealment. I'd bet money there are pressure plates under that snow. IEDs daisy-chained along the approach. Callahan leaned forward. Or it's just wind patterns, shadows. Kira ignored him. Her eyes were on the Admiral. Sir, if I'm right, Bravo team is walking into an ambush. This isn't a depot. It's a trap. Hendricks studied the imagery. His face was unreadable. Intelligence assessment concluded this was a low-security target. Local warlords with minimal tactical training. Then intelligence is wrong, sir. The words hung in the air like a challenge. You didn't tell an admiral that intelligence was wrong. Not as a petty officer. Not in your first 6 months on a team. Not if you wanted to have a career. Boone Mackenzie stepped forward, studying the thermal image more closely. She's right. Look at the heat bloom from this structure here. That's a generator signature. Too big for basic power needs. You run a generator that size, you're powering something serious. Communications equipment, maybe electronic warfare systems. Hendrix's expression didn't change, but Kira saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. The math of risk versus reward. The political cost of aborting an operation versus the tactical cost of walking into an ambush. Noted, he said finally. Overwatch will adjust their assessment based on what they observe on the ground. If the situation changes, we adapt. But the mission stands. We need those nukes. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Wheels up at 2100. Get your gear squared away. Dismissed. The room emptied in the controlled chaos of men preparing for combat. Kira gathered her folder and headed for the door. Thorne! She turned. Boone was standing by the projector, still studying the thermal image. That was either really smart or really stupid, he said without looking at her. Which do you think it was, Master Chief? I think you just made yourself a target. He finally looked at her. His eyes were the color of winter ice. Callahan and half this team already think you're here because of politics. Now you're second-guessing intelligence in front of the Admiral. You're making enemies. I didn't come here to make friends. Boone's expression didn't change. No, you came here to prove something. That's dangerous. Operators who are trying to prove something make mistakes. They take risks they shouldn't take. They get people killed. Kira felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, colder than that. With respect, Master Chief, I'm not here to prove anything to you or anyone else. I'm here because I'm the best long-range shooter in this unit. If Bravo team walks into an ambush, they're going to need someone who can shoot. And I can shoot. A ghost of something crossed Boone's face. It might have been approval, or it might have been something else entirely. Prove it, he said. On the range, one shot, right now. You make it, I'll trust you with my life on that ridge. You miss, I'm recommending to the Admiral we swap you out for Baker. He's not as good, but he's been downrange. Kira met his eyes. What's the range? 1,200 meters. Wind is gusting to 20 knots. Cold bore, no sighters. It was an impossible shot. The kind of shot you didn't take in combat because the odds were too low and the cost of missing was too high. But this wasn't combat. This was a test. And Kira had been taking tests her entire life. Let's go. The range at Bagram was a strip of desert that stretched out toward distant mountains. The wind came off the peaks in irregular gusts that made the heat shimmer dance like water. 200 meters downrange, a steel target the size of a man's torso stood alone against the beige infinity. Boone set up the spotting scope while Kira checked her rifle. The MK-22 was new. She'd only put 200 rounds through it. The barrel was still factory tight, which meant it would shoot a hair different than a worn-in gun. She'd have to account for that. Wind's variable, Boone said, eye to the spotting scope. I'm seeing gusts from 8 to 20 knots. Full value, left to right. Temperature is 32 Celsius. Elevation here is 4,000 feet, but you're shooting across a depression, so effective elevation is closer to 3,500. Kira did the math in her head. 1,200 meters. In American terms, just over 1,300 yards. 3/4 of a mile. The bullet would be in the air for almost 2 seconds. In that time, gravity would pull it down, wind would push it sideways, and the rotation of the Earth itself would cause drift. She settled into position behind the rifle. Prone, bipod loaded, cheek weld firm, eye relief perfect. The reticle of the Schmidt and Bender scope was crisp against the hazy target. No pressure, Boone said, but Callahan is watching from the tower with binoculars, along with about 15 other guys. Word travels fast on a FOB. Kira didn't respond. She was building the shot in her mind. The wind was the biggest variable. She watched the mirage, the way it boiled and shifted. She watched the dust devils forming and dying in the middle distance. She felt the wind on the back of her neck and translated that feeling into numbers. 1,200 meters. Bullet drop would be approximately 41 feet. She dialed 28.5 mils of elevation into the turret. Click, click, click. Each click was 1/10 of a mil. Each mil was 3.6 inches at 100 meters. The math was automatic now, burned into her brain through 10,000 repetitions. Wind right now, it was gusting to 18 knots, left to right, full value. She'd need to hold approximately 6 feet left of center, but the wind wasn't constant. She needed to time the shot for a lull or for a consistent gust. Inconsistency was death. She watched, waited. The wind was a living thing. It had rhythms, patterns. There, a sustained gust. 15 knots, holding steady for 3 seconds. 4, 5. Kira took a breath, let half of it out, found the natural respiratory pause where her body was most still. Her heart rate was 52 beats per minute, slow and steady. The reticle hovered 6 feet left of the target, empty space. She was aiming at nothing and trusting physics to bring the bullet home. The trigger broke clean. Surprise break, the way it was supposed to be. The recoil was a gentle push. The muzzle brake did its job, keeping the rifle flat. Through the scope, Kira saw the bullet trace. A faint distortion in the air, like looking through water. The trace arced up, then down, then... The steel target rang like a bell. The sound took another second to reach them. A clear, pure note that said, hit. Boone didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he pulled back from the spotting scope. Center mass. Call it a 9-inch group at 1,200 meters in variable wind. He looked at her with something that might have been respect. That's the best cold-bore shot I've seen in 30 years. Kira safed the rifle and stood. Her legs were shaky. Not from the shot, from the weight of what that shot meant. Do you trust me now, Master Chief? Boone's face was unreadable. I trust that you can shoot. Trust is something different. Trust is built downrange, when everything's on fire and the plan's gone to hell. That's when I'll know if I can trust you. He started breaking down the spotting scope. But you can shoot, that's a start. 2,100 hours came fast. The MH-47 Chinook helicopter was a beast of a machine. Wind rotors, enough lift capacity to haul a small truck, loud enough to wake the dead. Kira sat in the red-lit interior, surrounded by Bravo team. 12 men, all of them bigger than her, all of them with more deployment time, all of them watching her with varying degrees of skepticism. Chief Callahan sat directly across from her. His kit was immaculate, plate carrier loaded with magazines, helmet mounted with night vision, the tools of close-quarters violence arranged with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. He leaned forward, speaking loud enough to be heard over the rotor wash. First time in country, Thorne. It wasn't a question. It was a statement designed to undermine. Yes, Chief. Thought so. You've got that look. Clean gear, new rifle, eyes wide open. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Don't worry, that'll change. Usually takes about 30 seconds after the first bullet cracks past your head. One of the other operators laughed. Boone sat next to her, cleaning his spotting scope with a lens cloth. He didn't look up. Callahan, how many of your team has seen someone make a 1,200-meter shot in 20-knot winds? The laughter stopped. Because I just watched Thorne do it. Cold bore. First round. So maybe instead of running your mouth, you focus on not stepping on an IED when we hit the ground. Callahan's face hardened. Master Chief, with all respect, range performance doesn't mean... It means she can shoot, which is literally her only job on this operation. Your job is to kick doors and clear rooms. Her job is to keep you alive while you do it. I suggest you let her do her job. The tension in the helicopter was thick enough to cut, but Callahan backed down. Boone's rank and reputation carried weight that Kira's shooting scores never would. But then Boone did something unexpected. He leaned close, speaking directly into her ear to be heard over the rotors. I served with your mother, he said quietly. Lydia Thorne, best combat medic I ever knew. Kira's breath caught. She turned to look at him, but his face was unreadable in the red light. Mogadishu, October 3rd, 1993. She died following orders from a commander named Marcus Aldrich, Delta Force. He sent her forward to save a man who was already dead. She knew it was suicide, but she went anyway. He pulled something from his vest, a photograph, edges worn, image faded. A young woman in Army combat uniform, dark hair pulled back, strong features, a confident smile. The woman looked exactly like Kira. 2 weeks later, Aldrich was declared KIA IED attack. No body recovered. Boone's eyes found hers in the darkness. If I see you about to make the same choice your mother made, I won't let you. Even if it means carrying you off that mountain unconscious. Even if it means disobeying orders myself. Understand? Kira stared at the photograph, at her mother's face. A face she'd only seen in official Army portraits. Never like this. Never in the field. Never with that look in her eyes that said she knew exactly what she was walking into and chose to do it anyway. Why are you telling me this now? Because, Boone said, tucking the photo back into his vest, history has a way of repeating itself, and I'm not letting it repeat tonight. The crew chief called out, 5 minutes. The team started final checks. Magazines seated, night vision powered on, comms tested. The ritual of men preparing to step into the dark. Kira checked her own gear. The MK-22 was broken down in her pack. She'd reassemble it on the ridge. The SIG P226 pistol on her hip was loaded with 15 rounds of 9mm. Not much use at 1,200 meters, but comforting to have. Her plate carrier held 6 magazines of 7.62 NATO for the rifle. 120 rounds. If she needed more than that, something had gone catastrophically wrong. The crew chief held up one finger. 1 minute. The helicopter banked hard, beginning its descent. Through the open ramp, Kira could see the mountains rising like broken teeth against the star-filled sky. Somewhere down there in that darkness was a valley full of men who wanted to kill them. And somewhere in that valley was the truth about whether she belonged here. The skids touched down, the ramp dropped. Go, go, go! Bravo team poured out into the night. Kira followed, her boots hitting Afghan dirt for the first time. The rotor wash tried to blow her over. The noise was overwhelming. The darkness was absolute except for the green glow of night vision. Then the Chinook lifted, banking away, and the silence rushed in like a flood. They were alone in the mountains. Boone's hand signal was clear. Follow me. Kira adjusted her pack and started climbing. 11,400 feet. The air was thin enough that every step felt like breathing through a straw. The temperature had dropped to -8 Celsius, cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. Cold enough that the moisture in Kira's breath crystallized before it hit the ground. They'd been climbing for 3 hours, straight up. The ridge was a knife edge of shale and ice that seemed designed specifically to break ankles and punish hubris. Kira's quads burned. Her lungs burned. The straps of her pack dug into her shoulders like claws. Boone climbed ahead of her, moving with the steady, mechanical precision of a machine. 61 years old, and he was pulling away. Kira gritted her teeth and pushed harder. They crested the ridge just as the sky began to lighten. Not dawn, not yet, but the promise of dawn. That gray pre-light that turned the world into shades of charcoal and ash. Boone held up a fist. "Stop." Kira froze, dropping to a knee. Her breath came in ragged gasps that she tried to control. Breathing too hard meant noise. Noise meant compromise. Boone pulled out his rangefinder and began scanning the valley below. Kira used the moment to pull the MK-22 from her pack and reassemble it. Barrel to receiver, bolt carrier group, magazine, scope mounted and zeroed. The familiar weight of the rifle was comforting, like holding hands with an old friend. "Valley floor is 4,200 meters below us," Boone whispered, his voice barely audible. "Compound is at our 12 o'clock, range 1,400 meters. I'm seeing heat signatures, multiple personnel, estimated 20 to 30 individuals." He passed the thermal binos to Kira. Through the optic, the world became a painting in heat. The compound glowed white-hot against the cold ground. Individual figures moved like ghosts, but it was the patterns that caught Kira's attention. The same patterns she'd seen in the satellite imagery. "Master Chief, look at the western ridge. Those heat signatures. They're spaced exactly the same as the satellite photos. 40-meter intervals. And look at the gear. Those aren't AKs. Those are belt-fed weapons." Boone took the binos back, studying the signatures. DSHK heavy machine guns. 12 7mm. Russian-made. Those are anti-vehicle weapons. You don't use those for perimeter security unless you're expecting armored assault. Kira felt her pulse quicken. Or unless you're expecting helicopters. Or, Boone said quietly, unless you knew we were coming. He scanned the compound systematically, then he went still. Completely still, in a way that made Kira's blood run cold. "Master Chief? Look at the main structure, that rooftop." Kira looked through the thermal. She saw something that made her breath catch. A large rectangular heat signature, steady, consistent, the thermal bloom of serious electrical equipment. "That's not a generator," she said. "That's too big, too clean. That's a Pol 21 system," Boone finished. "Russian electronic warfare suite, jamming, signals intelligence, the works." His voice had gone flat. "This isn't local warlords, Thorne. This is professional. Someone with access to Russian military hardware set this up. Should we call it in? Abort the mission? And tell the Admiral what? That we think maybe possibly the enemy has better gear than expected?" Intel said low threat. "We'd need concrete proof to abort at this point." Boone set up the spotting scope, settling into a hide position behind a cluster of rocks. Kira deployed the bipod on the MK-22 and settled in next to him. From here, they had a perfect view of the entire valley. The compound, the approach routes, every possible avenue of attack or escape. "Bravo team is 10 minutes out from phase line Alpha," Boone said, checking his tactical display. "Once they cross that line, they're committed. Point of no return." Kira scanned through her rifle scope, her training taking over. Sector by sector, left to right, near to far. Looking for threats, looking for anything that didn't belong. That's when she saw him. On the roof of the main compound building, a figure emerged from a doorway. But this wasn't an insurgent in traditional dress. This was someone wearing modern tactical gear, Ops Corps helmet, Cry Precision combat pants, L3 night vision goggles flipped up on the helmet, a plate carrier loaded with magazine pouches that looked American in design. The figure moved to the edge of the roof, scanning the ridgeline with what looked like a high-powered spotting scope. "Master Chief," Kira said quietly, "main compound, rooftop. You seeing this?" Boone swung his spotting scope to the target. "What the hell?" Through the scope, Kira could see details now. The figure was Caucasian, maybe late 50s, short-cropped gray hair. The confidence in his movement spoke of years of training, decades. This wasn't some hired mercenary playing soldier. This was a professional. On his shoulder, she saw a patch. She couldn't make out the details at this range, but the shape was familiar. The outline of a sword. Wings. Delta Force Combat Patch, Boone breathed. Old style, the kind they stopped using in the mid-90s. Could be fake, stolen. Could be, but Boone's voice said he didn't believe that. The figure on the roof lowered his spotting scope and pulled out a radio. Kira watched his body language, the way he moved, the way he scanned. Professional, efficient, almost bored, like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Then he turned, and for just a moment, the scope caught his face in profile. Boone went rigid. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not possible." "Master Chief?" Boone's hands were shaking on the spotting scope. "That's Marcus Aldrich. He was my commanding officer in Mogadishu. October 3rd, 1993. His voice was hollow. "He died in that fight. I was at the memorial service. I saw them fold the flag." Kira kept her eye to the scope, watching the figure on the roof. "Are you sure?" "I served under him for 3 years. I'd know that face anywhere." Boone's breathing was unsteady now. "If that's Aldrich, if he's alive, then he's been operating in the shadows for 10 years. And if he's here, if he's running this operation..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The man on the roof raised his radio to his lips. Kira couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could read his body language. Calm, controlled, giving orders. Then he did something that made Kira's blood freeze. He turned and looked directly at their ridge. Not scanning, not searching, looking, like he knew exactly where they were. And then he smiled. He raised his hand in a casual wave, mocking, confident. "Master Chief, he's looking right at us." "Impossible. We're concealed. Thermal blankets. No heat signature. No way he can..." A high-pitched whine filled Kira's ears. Not external, internal, coming through her radio headset. A digital screech that spiked pain through her skull. Boone ripped his headset off. "Jammer! He just activated the electronic warfare suite." Kira tore her own headset away. The whine was everywhere now. Every radio frequency jammed. Every communication channel flooded with white noise. They were cut off. No contact with Bravo team. No contact with command. No way to warn anyone that they were walking into a trap set by a ghost who should have been dead for 10 years. Through the scope, Kira watched Aldrich on the roof. He was still looking at their position, still smiling. Then he raised his hand higher, not waving now, pointing directly at them. Boone grabbed his tactical display, trying to raise Bravo team on alternate frequencies. Nothing, just static. "They're deaf and blind," he said, "and they're 3 minutes from the kill zone." Kira watched through her scope as figures began moving on the valley floor. Not panicked, coordinated, taking up positions. The DSHK machine guns began traversing, aiming at the exact point where Bravo team would emerge from the pass. She could see the math playing out, 12 men walking into overlapping fields of fire from belt-fed weapons. IEDs wired along their approach. No communication, no warning. It would be a massacre. "Master Chief, we have to stop them." "We can't. No comms. No way to signal without giving away our position entirely. And ROE says we can't fire unless fired upon. They'll be dead before they can fire back." Boone's face was hard as stone. But in his eyes, Kira saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, for the men about to die, for the choice he was about to make. "Then they die following orders," he said, but his voice broke on the words. "That's the job, Thorne. Sometimes the job means watching your friends die and not being able to do anything about it." Kira felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. A clarity, a certainty. She swung the rifle, scanning for the machine gun position. Range, 1,380 meters. Wind, 18 knots, left to right. Temperature, -20. The shot was possible. Difficult, but possible. "That's not the job," she said. "That's surrender." Boone grabbed her shoulder. "Thorne, if you fire that weapon, you will be court-martialed. You will lose your trident. You will lose everything you've worked for. Is that worth it?" Kira thought about Chief Callahan's words on the helicopter, about being untested, about freezing under pressure. She thought about every instructor who had told her she didn't belong, every teammate who had looked at her and seen a liability instead of an asset. She thought about 12 men walking into certain death while she lay on a mountain and did nothing. She thought about her mother, running into fire to save lives, dying because she followed a bad order. And she thought about Boone's promise that he wouldn't let history repeat. "Yes," she said. She settled the crosshair on the DSHK machine gun. The gunner was already behind the weapon, already aiming. His finger was on the butterfly trigger. In 30 seconds, Bravo team would emerge into his field of fire. 20 seconds. Kira did the calculations. Elevation, windage, temperature, Coriolis effect, spin drift. All the variables that turn shooting into mathematics and mathematics into faith. 15 seconds. Then Boone's hand released her shoulder. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Wind just shifted. Call it 20 knots now. Steady gust. Hold 4 mils left." Kira looked at him. His face was unreadable, but his eyes said everything. He was giving her permission. No, more than that, he was giving her an order. The kind of order that ends careers. The kind that gets men court-martialed. The kind that saves lives. 10 seconds. Kira adjusted her hold. The crosshair hovered in empty space left of the target, trusting the math, trusting the training. 5 seconds. She found the respiratory pause, the moment between heartbeats where the body was perfectly still. "Command," she said into the dead radio. "Signal is breaking up. I repeat, signal is..." She pulled the trigger. The rifle roared. The muzzle brake vented gas in a perfect ring. The recoil was a familiar friend pushing against her shoulder. Through the scope, Kira saw the bullet trace arc across the valley. 1,380 meters away, the DSHK heavy machine gun exploded. The receiver shattered. The feed tray disintegrated. The gunner was thrown backward in a spray of metal fragments and blood. The echo of the shot rolled through the valley like thunder. For one perfect moment, there was silence. Then the radios erupted with static-filled voices. "Contact! Contact! Taking fire from the ridge!" "Bravo team, this is Sierra 1. Ambush at your 12 o'clock high. DSHK positions. IEDs on the valley floor. Do not advance to phase line Alpha." Admiral Hendrix's voice cut through, distant and distorted. "Sierra 1, cease fire. Who authorized that shot? You are in violation of rules of engagement." But Kira wasn't listening. She was already scanning for the next target. Below in the valley, the ambush had been spoiled. The insurgents were opening fire prematurely before Bravo team had reached the kill zone. Without the heavy machine gun, it was just rifle fire. Sporadic, survivable. "Good hit," Boone said quietly. He was watching through the spotting scope, his face unreadable. "Target neutralized, but you just kicked the hornet's nest." On the valley floor, Bravo team had taken cover behind a low stone wall. They were pinned, but alive. Kira watched Chief Callahan through her scope. He was yelling into his radio, coordinating his team. Alive because she had violated orders. Through the scope, she saw Aldridge on the rooftop again. He wasn't smiling now. He was furious, barking orders into his radio, pointing at their ridge. "He's calling fire on our position," Boone said. "We need to displace. Now." "Not yet. Bravo's still pinned." "Thorne, we have maybe 30 seconds before..." The whistle of an incoming mortar round cut him off. The world exploded. Kira rolled away from the rifle as the world became fire and thunder. The mortar round impacted 20 meters to their left, close enough that the concussion wave slammed into her like a physical blow, close enough that she felt the heat wash over her thermal suit, close enough that rock fragments peppered her position like hail. Her ears rang. The world was muffled cotton and high-pitched whine. Boone was pulling her arm, yelling something she couldn't hear. She grabbed the rifle and followed him, scrambling across the shale ridge as another mortar round impacted behind them. Then another. The enemy gunners were bracketing their position, walking the fire up the ridge, trying to pin down the coordinates. They made it 15 meters before the next round hit. This one was closer. The explosion lifted Kira off her feet and threw her into a cluster of rocks. Her helmet slammed into stone. Stars exploded across her vision. The rifle was torn from her hands. When her vision cleared, she was lying on her back, staring up at the gray pre-dawn sky. Every part of her body hurt. Her ears were ringing so loud she couldn't hear her own breathing. She turned her head. Boone was 3 meters away, lying on his side. His leg was wrong. The angle was wrong. Kira crawled to him, her hands shaking. Blood was pooling beneath his right thigh. A piece of shrapnel, superheated by the explosion, had punched through his quadriceps muscle. It had missed the femoral artery by millimeters, but the bleeding was bad. "Can't," Boone gasped, his face gray with shock. "Can't feel my foot." Kira ripped her individual first aid kit from her belt. The tourniquet was there, a strip of Velcro and a windlass that could mean the difference between life and death. She looped it high on his thigh, above the wound, and began cranking the windlass. 1 turn, 2 turns, 3. Boone screamed. The sound cut through the ringing in her ears like a knife. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Another whistle. "Incoming." "Move," Boone gasped through the pain. "Leave me. Get to cover." Kira grabbed his drag handle, the horizontal strap on the back of his plate carrier designed for exactly this purpose, extracting casualties under fire. She pulled. Boone was 220 pounds of muscle and gear. Dead weight. Physics said she couldn't move him. Every instructor who had ever doubted her said she couldn't move him. The men who had told her she didn't have the physical capability said she couldn't move him. She pulled anyway. They moved a foot, then another. The mortar round impacted where they had been lying 5 seconds before. The blast wave shoved Kira forward, slamming her chest into the rocks. But she didn't let go of the drag handle. She could see an outcropping of rock 20 meters away. Cover. If she could get him there. If she could just... Boone grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak. "Leave me," he said. His voice was fading. "Get the rifle. Provide cover for Bravo. That's the mission." Kira looked at him, at the blood, at the gray pallor of his face. She thought about every time someone had told her she wasn't strong enough, that she didn't have the physical capability, that when a 200-pound operator went down, she wouldn't be able to save him. "Shut up, Boone," she said. "I'm not leaving you." She heaved backward. Her quads burned. Her back screamed. The altitude made every breath feel like drowning. But she moved him, inch by agonizing inch. The mortars kept falling, walking up the ridge, searching, but Kira didn't stop. She pulled until her hands were raw inside her gloves. She pulled until her vision started to gray at the edges. She pulled until they reached the outcropping and she could roll him into cover. She collapsed next to him, gasping. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Every muscle trembled with exhaustion. Boone's eyes found hers. There was something in them, something like understanding. "You're not supposed to be able to do that," he whispered. "I'm not supposed to be here at all," Kira said. "But here I am." She crawled to the edge of the outcropping and looked down at the valley. The sun was rising now, real dawn, the kind that turned the mountains gold and made the snow sparkle like diamonds. Through the morning light, she could see Bravo team, still pinned, still taking fire. And she could see her rifle, lying in the open 20 meters away, where it had been torn from her hands. Without that rifle, she was useless. Just another body on a mountain, unable to help the men dying below. She looked at Boone. "I have to get the rifle. You go out there, you're dead. They're bracketing the whole ridge. Next mortar volley will land right on top of it. Then I better be fast." Before he could argue, before she could talk herself out of it, Kira launched herself from cover. 20 meters, that was all. Just 20 meters across open ground while enemy gunners tried to kill her. She ran. The first mortar whistled in before she'd gone 5 steps. It impacted behind her. The blast wave shoved her forward. She kept running. 15 meters. 10. Another whistle. This one closer. 5 meters. The explosion threw her sideways. Shrapnel whined past her head, but her hand closed around the rifle's stock. She grabbed it and dove, rolling back toward cover as another mortar round obliterated the spot where the rifle had been. She slammed into the outcropping, gasping. The rifle was intact. Somehow, impossibly. Boone stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Or the bravest," Kira gasped. Bravery and stupidity looked the same from a distance. She checked the rifle. Scope was intact. Action was clear. She pulled the bolt back. A round was still chambered, ready to fire. Below in the valley, Bravo team was in trouble. She could see them through the scope now. Chief Callahan was dragging a wounded operator behind the wall. Another SEAL was returning fire with his rifle, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. And on the eastern ridge, she saw movement, a new threat. A team of insurgents was setting up another machine gun. PKM, Russian-made, belt-fed. If they got that gun into action, it would have a perfect flanking angle on Bravo's position. Range, 1,640 meters, 1 mile. The shot was impossible. In these conditions, with her body shaking from exertion and adrenaline, with her hands frozen and her vision still spotted from the concussion. But Bravo team didn't need possible. They needed impossible. Kira settled into position. She forced her breathing to slow, forced her hands to steady. "Range?" Boone asked weakly. 1 mile. "That's..." He coughed. Blood flecked his lips. "That's impossible." "I know." She dialed the elevation turret. 21.5 mils. More elevation than she'd ever used in her life. The numbers blurred together as she cranked the turret. Click after click after click. The PKM gunner racked the bolt on his weapon. In 5 seconds, he would open fire. In 10 seconds, Bravo team would start taking casualties. Kira didn't have 10 seconds, but Boone's voice cut through the cold air, weak but focused. "All right," he said. "You want the old school method?" "Boone, you're delirious." "Maybe," he coughed again. "But I'm right. Listen." He was breathing hard, fighting through the pain and shock, but his voice was steady. "During Cold War operations, Soviet-Afghan border, early 80s. He paused, gathering strength. "We didn't have computerized scopes, didn't have fancy rangefinders that did the math for us. What did you have? We read the earth, the air. We became part of it." Kira glanced at him. His face was pale. His lips were starting to turn blue, but his eyes were clear. "See how the heat shimmer moves?" he said. "That's your wind made visible. Watch it." She looked downrange. The morning heat was creating mirage, that wavering distortion that rose from the earth like water. "See how it boils? How it shifts?" Boone's voice was fading, but he pushed through. "That's telling you everything you need to know about the wind between here and there." Kira watched. The mirage was moving left to right, steady, consistent. "Feel the mountain under you," Boone whispered. "It's breathing. The earth breathes. Match your breath to it." It sounded insane, the words of a man losing too much blood, slipping into shock. But Kira closed her eyes for just a moment, felt the stone beneath her, felt the rhythm of the wind, and somehow, impossibly, she understood what he meant. "Your mother used to say something," Boone said. His voice was barely audible now. She said, "The bullet knows where to go. You just have to trust it. You just have to let it." Kira opened her eyes. The PKM gunner was settling behind his weapon. His assistant gunner was feeding the belt. They were seconds from opening fire. She made the final adjustments. Range, 1 mile. Bullet drop, approximately 41 feet. Wind, 18 knots, left to right. She held 6 feet left of the target, aiming at empty space, trusting physics, trusting training, trusting something older than both. She found the pause between heartbeats, that perfect moment of stillness, and she pulled the trigger. The rifle roared. The recoil pushed against her shoulder. The muzzle brake vented gas in a perfect ring. 1 second. The bullet was supersonic, tearing through the cold morning air at 3,000 feet per second. 2 seconds. It transitioned to subsonic. The physics changed. The bullet wanted to tumble, to destabilize. But the rifling held. The spin kept it true. 3 seconds. Through the scope, Kira saw the PKM gunner's head snap back. A pink mist vaporized in the dawn light. The man crumpled over his weapon, dead before his brain could process what had happened. The shot had flown 1 mile through gusting wind and hit within an inch of her aim point. Boone was staring at her through the spotting scope. "That's," his voice broke, "I've never, in 30 years of combat, that's the finest shot I've ever witnessed." Kira worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round. "You taught me the last part," she said. Old school finished what new school started, but she didn't have time to celebrate. Because on the rooftop of the main compound, she saw Aldrich, and he was looking right at their position, right at the muzzle flash that had just given them away. He raised his radio, and Kira knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't calling for more mortars. He was calling for something worse. The sound came before she saw it, a deep, rhythmic thumping that she felt in her chest before her ears registered it. Helicopter. "Master Chief," she said quietly, "we have company." Boone was pale. His breathing was shallow. The tourniquet had stopped the bleeding, but shock was setting in. Hypothermia wasn't far behind. His lips were blue. "What kind?" he managed. Kira scanned the sky. There, coming low over the eastern ridge. Not American. The profile was wrong. Twin turbines, stub wings for weapon mounts. The distinctive silhouette of a MiL Mi-24 Hind attack helicopter. "Hind," she said. "Armed." Boone closed his eyes. "Of course it is." The helicopter swept across the valley, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of snow. It was conducting a search pattern, looking for them. Aldrich had called in the heavy gun, and now there was nowhere to hide. A thermal sight on that bird would light them up like flares. Kira grabbed her radio handset, hoping against hope that the jammer had a gap in its coverage. She keyed the mic. "TOC, this is Sierra 1. We are compromised. Enemy gunship inbound. Request immediate air support. How copy?" Static. White noise. She tried again. "Any station, this is Sierra 1. Emergency traffic. We have wounded and are under attack by..." A burst of static cut through, followed by a voice. Distant, distorted, but audible. "Sierra 1, TOC, read you broken and garbled. Say again your traffic." Kira's heart surged. The signal was weak, but it was there. The angle of the ridge must be providing partial shielding from the jammer's directional antenna. "TOC Sierra 1, Sierra 2 is critical casualty, femoral injury. We need immediate medevac. Enemy has deployed attack helicopter and is actively searching for our position. Request." The radio went dead. The jammer had found the frequency and crushed it. Kira slammed the handset against the rock in frustration. So close. They had been so close. The Hind was closer now, circling. The pilot was good, staying out of effective rifle range while the gunner scanned with thermal optics, looking for the heat signature of 2 Americans hiding in the rocks. "Thermal blanket," Boone said. His voice was weak but lucid. "In my pack, left side pouch." Kira found it. A thin sheet of metallic fabric designed to block infrared signatures. She draped it over both of them, tucking the edges under rocks. It wouldn't make them invisible, but it might buy them time. Through a gap in the fabric, she watched the Hind complete another orbit. The helicopter was a beautiful machine in its own way. A flying tank, nearly invulnerable to small arms fire, armed with rockets, cannon, and anti-tank missiles. Against two people with a sniper rifle and a pistol, it was overkill of the highest order. The Hind's nose dipped as it began another search pass. Closer this time. The rotor wash reached their position, threatening to tear away the thermal blanket. Kira held it down, her frozen fingers digging into the fabric. If it blew away, they were dead. The gunner would spot them instantly and unleash hell. The helicopter passed overhead. So close she could see the rivets on its armored belly. So close she could see the gunner in the front cockpit, head down, staring at his thermal display. Then it was past, banking away to search another sector of the ridge. Kira released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "That was close," Boone whispered. "Too close." They'd gotten lucky. The thermal blanket had worked, but luck was a finite resource in combat. Eventually, it ran out. And when it did, people died. Kira pulled the blanket aside just enough to look at Boone. His face was gray. His eyes were starting to glaze. The combination of blood loss, shock, and hypothermia was shutting down his body, one system at a time. She checked the tourniquet, still tight, still holding, but he needed real medical care. A surgeon, blood transfusions, warmth, things that didn't exist on a frozen mountain in Afghanistan. "Stay with me, Boone," she said, slapping his cheek lightly. "Don't you dare check out on me." His eyes focused slightly. "Kira," he said. It was the first time he'd used her first name. "What?" He reached into his vest with a trembling hand, not for the photograph this time, for something else. A small notebook, standard issue, the kind every soldier carried. He pressed it into her hand. "If I don't make it," he said, his voice was fading. "Read it. Page 17. The truth about your father." "Boone, you're going to make it. We're getting out of here, both of us." But he wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were closing. His breathing was becoming shallow. Kira looked at the notebook in her hand, then she tucked it into her vest. She'd read it later. When they were safe. When Boone was in a hospital bed, awake and alive to explain whatever secrets he'd been carrying. The radio crackled again. Not on their encrypted tactical frequency, on the open emergency channel that anyone could monitor. Aldrich's voice came through, clear and mocking. "Kira Thorne, I know you can hear me." She grabbed the handset but didn't respond. Answering would confirm her position. "Your mother's daughter," Aldrich continued. His voice was warm, conversational, like they were old friends catching up. "Lydia's little girl, all grown up and playing soldier." Kira's hand tightened on the handset. "I've been watching you, tracking your progress through the pipeline. You're good. Better than your mother was, actually. That Miles shot, impressive, reminded me of your old man." Kira's breath caught. "Oh, didn't Boone tell you?" Aldrich's voice carried a smile. "I knew your father too. Captain Nolan Thorne. Army Ranger. Good man. Solid operator. Died in a training accident when you were just an infant. 1998. Fort Benning. Parachute malfunction. Tragic." Kira felt ice spreading through her chest. "But we both know accidents happen all the time in the military," Aldrich said, "especially to people who ask too many questions. About what happened to their wives in Mogadishu. About who gave the orders that got them killed." No, it wasn't possible. Her father had died in an accident. The Army had investigated. There had been a report, findings, conclusions. "Your father started digging," Aldrich continued. "Started asking why Lydia was ordered forward that day. Who gave that order? Why a decorated medic was sent to treat a man who was already dead. He was getting close to the truth. Too close. Boone grabbed Kira's wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man who looked half dead. "Don't listen to him," he gasped. "He's trying to get in your head, make you angry, make you make mistakes." But Kira was already past anger. She was in a place beyond emotion, a cold, clear space where there was only the mission, the target, the shot. Aldrich's voice crackled again. "I couldn't let your father expose what really happened that day, Kira. The war crimes we covered up, the civilians who died, the friendly fire incidents, the things the army didn't want the world to know. Lydia saw it all, and she wasn't going to stay quiet." The hind banked back toward their position. Aldrich was using his monologue to keep them distracted while the helicopter hunted. "So I sent her forward," Aldrich said. "I knew the RPG team was positioned in that building. I knew exactly where it would hit, made her death look heroic, got her a bronze star, kept the secrets buried." His voice hardened. "Your father? Well, parachutes fail sometimes, especially when someone who knows how they're packed decides they should. Fort Benning has excellent facilities, easy to arrange." Boone's voice was desperate now. "Kira, he's lying. He's trying to—" "And Boone?" Aldrich's voice cut through. "Did he tell you his part in all this? Did he tell you he signed the accident report? That he endorsed the equipment failure finding? That he helped bury your father's questions, along with your father?" Kira looked down at Boone. His face was twisted with anguish, with guilt, with shame. "I didn't know," Boone whispered. His eyes were wet. "Kira, I swear to God I didn't know about your father. I signed the report, I endorsed the findings, but I thought it was just an accident. I didn't know Aldrich had—" He broke off, coughing, blood on his lips. "But ignorance isn't innocence," he said. His voice was breaking. "Your father died asking questions, and I helped silence them. I helped bury the truth." Tears were running down his face now, cutting tracks through the dirt and blood. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so goddamn sorry." The hind made another pass, closer. The thermal optics sweeping across the ridge in a methodical search pattern. Aldrich's voice came through again. "I'm giving you a choice, Kira. The same choice I gave your mother. Leave Mackenzie. Walk away. There's an extraction point 2 clicks north of your position. I'll let you reach it. You can go home. Tell them you got separated in the fighting. No one will question it. You survive." The hind's shadow fell over them as it lined up for another pass. "Or you can stay with the old man. Try to drag him out like your mother tried to save that corpse. And you'll die just like she did. Brave and stupid and utterly pointless." The radio hissed with static. "Your choice. 60 seconds to decide." Kira looked down at Boone. He was crying now, from pain, from shame, from the weight of 32 years of guilt. "Go," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Please, Kira, I never deserved to train you. I let your mother die. I helped cover up your father's murder. Saving me won't change any of that." Kira checked the tourniquet one more time. Still tight, still holding. Then she looked into his eyes. "You're right," she said. "It won't change the past, but it changes what happens next." She grabbed his drag handle again. "My mother died following a bad order. My father died asking dangerous questions. I'm not doing either." Boone's eyes went wide. "Kira, no, you can't." "Watch me." She started pulling. The hind was repositioning for another gun run. They had maybe 30 seconds before the pilot lined up his shot, and the 30-millimeter cannon turned them into hamburger. "Why?" Boone gasped as she dragged him. "Why save me?" Kira pulled harder, her muscles screaming, her lungs burning. "Because you told me the truth when you could have stayed silent. Because you're trying to atone. Because that's what Mom would do." The hind's nose dipped. The cannon was traversing, targeting. Kira saw the edge of the ridge 10 meters ahead, a steep slope, Maybe survivable if they went over. Maybe not. "And Boone," she said, pulling with everything she had. "You're family now. We don't leave family behind." The cannon opened fire, a sound like a giant zipper being torn open. 30-millimeter rounds chewed up the ridge where they'd been hiding seconds before. Each round was the size of a beer bottle. Each impact threw up a geyser of rock and ice. Kira pulled Boone over the edge. They tumbled down the steep slope, rolling, slamming into rocks. The world spun, sky and stone and snow mixing together in a kaleidoscope of pain. Kira wouldn't let go of the drag handle, even as they fell, even as the rocks tore at her uniform and her body screamed in protest. They hit the bottom of the slope in a tangle of limbs and equipment. Kira's helmet had been torn off somewhere in the fall. Blood ran down the side of her face from a gash above her eyebrow. The rifle was still slung across her chest. Somehow, miraculously, Boone wasn't moving. His eyes were closed. For a terrible moment, Kira thought he was dead. Then she saw his chest rise, shallow, weak, but breathing. Above them, the hinds circled like a vulture. The pilot was repositioning for another gun run. They were in a narrow ravine now, sheer walls on both sides. No cover, no escape route. The helicopter's shadow fell over them as it lined up its approach. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in some heroic last stand, but pinned in a ditch while a Russian gunship turned them into paste. Kira unslung her rifle. 3 rounds left. She could try to hit the helicopter, maybe get lucky, damage a rotor blade, hit something critical. The odds were astronomical. Trying to hit a moving helicopter with a bolt-action rifle was like trying to shoot a flying eagle with a stone. But doing nothing meant death. At least this way, she'd die fighting. She brought the rifle up, tracking the hind through her scope. The helicopter was close now, 300 meters, 250. The cannon was traversing, lining up the shot. Kira centered the crosshair on the cockpit, on the gunner's position. If she could just... Her radio erupted with sound. Not Aldrich's voice this time. A different voice. American. Urgent. "Break, break, break! Viper 2-1 engaging hostile aircraft." The sky above the hind exploded. An F-16 Fighting Falcon screamed across the valley at 500 knots, its afterburner painting a trail of fire across the dawn sky. The pilot had come in low, using the terrain to mask his approach. Now he pulled vertical, climbing hard. The hind pilot saw him too late. Air-to-air missile launch. A sidewinder dropped from the F-16's wing, ignited, and streaked toward the helicopter in a corkscrew of white smoke. The hind pilot threw his aircraft into a desperate evasive maneuver, dumping flares and chaff. The missile locked onto a flare and detonated in a ball of orange flame 50 meters behind the helicopter. But the F-16 wasn't done. The pilot rolled inverted and dove, his 20-millimeter cannon spooling up, the air filled with tracer rounds, a river of fire that reached down from the sky and touched the hind's tail rotor. Metal shredded. The helicopter spun violently, its pilot fighting for control. "Splash 1 hind," the F-16 pilot called. His voice was calm and professional. "Sierra 1, Viper 2-1, we have your position. Cavalry's here." The hind was spiraling now, smoke pouring from its tail section. The pilot managed to level it just enough to avoid a complete crash, bringing it down hard on the valley floor half a click away. The impact crumpled the landing gear. The rotors disintegrated, but the crew compartment held. Men poured out of the wreck, scrambling for cover. Kira keyed her radio with shaking hands. "Viper 2-1, Sierra 1. That was outstanding shooting. We have 1 urgent surgical. Request immediate medevac." "Negative, Sierra. Airspace is still contested. We're working to suppress remaining threats, but we can't bring in a helo until we clear the valley. ETA on safe extraction is 30 mics. 30 minutes. Boone didn't have 30 minutes. Kira looked down at him. His skin was waxy. His breathing was barely perceptible. The hypothermia and shock were winning. Even if they got him to a hospital in the next 5 minutes, he might not make it. Copy, Viper. Sierra 1 will hold position and await extraction. But she couldn't just sit here and watch him die. There had to be something, some way to... Her radio crackled again. Admiral Hendricks' voice, cold, clipped, furious. Sierra 1, TOC actual, sitrep. Kira took a breath. TOC Sierra 1, we are in defensive position on the North Ridge. Sierra 2 is critical casualty, femoral wound, significant blood loss, severe hypothermia. He needs immediate evacuation. Understood. And what is your current tactical situation? We've been under attack by mortars and attack helicopter. Viper 2-1 just splashed the Hind. Enemy ground forces are still active in the valley. There was a long pause. Sierra 1, Bravo team has located the nuclear material. Mission objectives are met. However, we have lost contact with the primary target. Aldrich is in the wind. Intel indicates he may attempt to escape via the northern passes. Kira's blood ran cold. She knew what was coming next. Sierra 1, you are in position to observe the northern approaches. You are ordered to establish overwatch on the escape routes and interdict Aldrich if he attempts exfiltration. Do you copy? She looked at Boone, at his closed eyes, at the shallow rise and fall of his chest. TOC, negative. Sierra 2 requires immediate medical attention. I cannot leave him to establish overwatch. Petty Officer Thorne, Hendricks' voice went arctic. That was not a request. That was a direct order. Master Chief Mackenzie is stable. You've applied a tourniquet. He can survive another 30 minutes while you complete your mission. Aldrich cannot be allowed to escape. He has intelligence on our operations, our personnel, our methods. If he reaches Pakistan, we may never find him again. Sir, with respect, Mackenzie is dying. Every minute I delay decreases his chance of survival. Hendricks' voice cut like a blade. And every minute Aldrich has to escape means more Americans die down the road. You are a military operator, Petty Officer, not a medic, not a babysitter. Your job is to complete the mission. Now establish overwatch and confirm Aldrich's location. That is a direct order. Do you copy? Kira stared at the radio handset. She thought about her mother, about the order to advance, about the choice between following commands and doing what was right. She thought about Boone's words from the helicopter. Trust is built downrange. When everything's on fire and the plan's gone to hell. Everything was on fire. The plan had gone to hell. TOC Sierra 1, signal is breaking up. I repeat, signal is... She ripped the transmit cable out of the radio unit. The voice of Admiral Hendricks cut off mid-syllable, replaced by blessed silence. Boone's eyes opened slightly. Did you just... His voice was so weak she could barely hear it. Did you just hang up on an admiral? Signal interference, Kira said. Atmospheric conditions are unpredictable in these mountains. The ghost of a smile crossed Boone's face. You're going to get court-martialed. Probably. Was it worth it? Kira looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had doubted her, who had tested her, who had taught her that shooting was mathematics and trust was earned through fire, who carried the guilt of her parents' deaths like a cross on his back. Ask me when you're walking again, she said. The sound of rotors echoed across the valley, different from the Hind, friendlier, the distinctive thump of American helicopters. Two of them, MH-60 Blackhawks, coming in fast and low. Kira looked down at Boone. He was unconscious now, his breathing so shallow she had to watch his chest closely to see it move. The snow she'd packed around him had turned pink with blood that had seeped through the tourniquet. His face was the color of old parchment. She checked her watch. 28 minutes since Viper 21 had cleared the airspace. 2 minutes until medevac arrival. If Boone lasted 2 more minutes, the radio crackled. Not the encrypted frequency, the emergency channel. Sierra 1, this is Dustoff 3-1. We are inbound for medevac. Viper flight has cleared the airspace. Pop smoke when you have visual. Kira grabbed a smoke grenade from her vest and pulled the pin. Purple smoke billowed into the morning air, marking their position. The first Black Hawk flared over their location. The rotor wash turned the world into a hurricane of snow and noise. A PJ, a pararescue jumper, fast roped down. His medical bag was already open before his boots hit the ground. He took one look at Boone, and his professional calm cracked slightly. Jesus, how long has he been like this? 90 minutes, maybe more. Tourniquet is holding. The PJ was already checking vital signs, pulling out IV equipment. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. You did good. Tourniquet placement is perfect. He's hypothermic and shocky, but he's alive. We'll get him stable. A second PJ descended, moving to Kira. You injured? She looked down at herself. Blood on her face from the head wound. Her hands were torn and bleeding inside the gloves. Her ribs ached from where the shrapnel had grazed her. Her left arm hung at a funny angle that suggested something was broken. I'm fine, she said. Load him first. The PJ started to argue, then seemed to recognize a look in her eyes. The look that said she would stand here until her teammate was safe, and if you tried to treat her first, there would be consequences. Okay, we'll load him first. They strapped Boone to a Stokes litter and connected it to the hoist cable. As he was lifted toward the hovering Blackhawk, his hand reached out and grabbed Kira's sleeve. You carried me, he said. His voice was barely audible over the rotors. They said you couldn't, but you did. I told you, Kira said. I'm not supposed to be here at all, but here I am. He smiled, actually smiled. The first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Reaper, he said. Then he was rising into the air, spinning slowly on the cable, disappearing into the belly of the helicopter. The PJ grabbed Kira's arm. Your turn. She started to argue, then her legs gave out. The adrenaline was wearing off. The pain was rushing in to fill the space. The PJ caught her before she hit the ground. I got you, he said, clipping her into a rescue harness. You did good. You can let go now. Kira felt the cable take her weight, felt herself rising off the mountain. Below her, the battlefield was already becoming abstract. Small. The compound where men had died. The ridge where she'd made the impossible shot. The ravine where she'd nearly been killed by a helicopter. It was all getting smaller, farther away, but the weight of it wasn't getting any lighter. She closed her eyes and let the PJs pull her into the aircraft. Strong hands grabbed her vest and hauled her onto the deck. Someone was wrapping her in a thermal blanket. Someone else was checking her vitals. She opened her eyes. Chief Callahan was there, sitting against the bulkhead. His uniform was torn and bloody. A field dressing covered his shoulder. But he was alive. His whole team was alive. He met her eyes across the helicopter cabin. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Callahan did something Kira had never seen him do. He nodded. Just once. A slight dip of the head that acknowledged everything that had happened on that ridge. The warning shot that had saved his life. The mile shot that had broken the ambush. The refusal to leave a wounded teammate. Clear, Callahan said to the crew chief. We're all home. The Black Hawk banked hard, but before it could accelerate away, the crew chief screamed, Missile launch! Brake right! Brake right! Kira jerked upright. Through the open door, she saw it, a smoke trail spiraling up from the valley floor. Not from the crashed Hind, from the compound rooftop. Aldrich, he was standing there, clearly visible even at this distance. A Stinger missile launcher on his shoulder. The weapon's seeker head already locked onto the Black Hawk's heat signature. The pilot threw the aircraft into a violent, evasive maneuver. Flares popped from the defensive suite, white-hot decoys tumbling through the air. But Kira knew the math. She'd studied Stinger capabilities in training. The missile was faster than the helicopter. The flares might confuse it, might, or everyone on this bird would die. "Crew chief," Kira shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Open that door wider." "Ma'am, we're evading. You can't." "Now!" The crew chief hit the release. The door slid fully open. Wind screamed into the cabin. Kira grabbed a cargo strap with her broken left arm. Pain exploded white-hot through her vision. She leaned out into the slipstream. Her right hand found her SIG P226. 15 rounds, 9mm. Effective range maybe 50 meters against a stationary target. The Stinger missile was 800 meters away, closing at Mach 2. Over 1,500 miles per hour. It was impossible, even more impossible than the mile shot. A handgun against a hypersonic missile. Physics said no. Logic said no. Every instructor who had ever taught her ballistics said no. But Boone's voice echoed in her head. Old school. Don't aim. Feel. The bullet knows where to go. Kira didn't aim at the helicopter. She didn't aim at Aldrich. She aimed at a point in empty space where math and intuition told her the missile would be in exactly half a second. Leading a target, just like shooting skeet. Except the skeet was traveling supersonic, and if she missed, 12 people died. She pulled the trigger. 5 rounds. 6. 7. On the 8th round, the universe held its breath. The 9mm bullet, traveling at 1,000 feet per second, intersected the Stinger's flight path. At the exact microsecond, the missile crossed through that invisible point in space. The bullet struck the warhead's impact fuse. The missile detonated 800 meters from the helicopter. The shockwave rocked the Black Hawk violently, throwing Kira against the bulkhead. But they were far enough away. The aircraft stabilized. The alarm stopped screaming. They were alive. The crew chief pulled Kira back from the door. His face was white. "Did you just—" "No," Kira said quickly, holstering the pistol with shaking hands. "That didn't happen. Lucky malfunction. Atmospheric interference detonated it early. That's what goes in the report." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, shaken. "Sierra 1, I don't know what just happened back there, but we're clear. Heading to Bagram." Callahan was staring at her across the cabin. So were the other operators. They'd all seen it. The impossible shot with a handgun that had saved all their lives. Kira met Callahan's eyes. "Atmospheric conditions," she said firmly. "Unpredictable at altitude." Callahan slowly nodded, understanding passing between them. "Right. I'll write it up that way in my after-action." Boone was conscious on his stretcher, staring at her with something like awe. "That shot didn't happen," Kira repeated, louder this time. "Everyone clear?" "The missile malfunctioned. Random detonation. End of story." One by one, the operators nodded. Some things were better left off the official record. Some things would only invite questions nobody wanted to answer. Kira looked out the window one last time. On the compound rooftop below, Aldrich stood motionless, the empty Stinger launcher at his feet. Even at this distance, she could read his body language. Shock, disbelief, the realization that he'd just been beaten, not by firepower, not by luck, but by pure skill that transcended anything he'd ever seen. The Black Hawk banked away, accelerating toward Bagram. Kira leaned her head back against the vibrating bulkhead and finally allowed herself to close her eyes. They weren't home yet. There would be debriefings, investigations, questions about violated orders and severed communications. And somewhere out there, Marcus Aldrich was still alive, still free, still carrying the truth about her mother, about her father. But for now, they were alive. All of them. Sometimes that was enough. The flight to Bagram took 35 minutes. Kira spent most of it watching the medics work on Boone, counting each shallow breath, each beep of the cardiac monitor. When his eyes opened briefly and found hers, she nodded. Still here, still fighting. The helicopter touched down on the pad at Bagram. Medical personnel rushed forward with gurneys. Kira watched them load Boone into an ambulance. lights already flashing as it raced toward the surgical ward. Then she turned to face her reception committee. Admiral Hendricks stood 20 feet away, flanked by 2 Marine MPs and a Navy JAG officer. His face could have been carved from ice. Kira climbed down from the helicopter unsteadily. Her left arm was definitely broken. Every breath sent spikes of pain through her ribs, but she kept her spine straight. She stopped 3 paces from the Admiral and came to attention as best she could. "Sir, Petty Officer Thorne reporting." Hendricks's jaw worked. "Master Chief Mackenzie's prognosis?" "Unknown, sir. The PJs said he had a chance. The tourniquet held. We got him out in time. Because you refused a direct order to leave him and establish overwatch on Aldrich's escape route." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Because you severed communications when ordered to abandon your wounded spotter." "Atmospheric interference, sir." "Don't." Hendricks's voice cut like a blade. "Don't insult my intelligence. You unplugged your transmit cable. You deliberately cut communications. You violated every protocol in the book." Kira met his eyes. "Yes, sir, I did." The admission seemed to surprise him. "You also violated rules of engagement by firing before receiving hostile fire. You disobeyed tactical command. You compromised your position. And you allowed a high-value target to escape rather than complete your assigned mission." "Yes, sir." "In a normal unit, that means court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison." Kira said nothing. He was right. Hendricks stepped closer. "But this isn't a normal unit." He paused. "Master Chief Mackenzie submitted a report before surgery. He stated that you demonstrated exceptional judgment under impossible circumstances, that your decision to engage the DSHK prevented Bravo's destruction, that your mile shot was the finest marksmanship he'd witnessed in 30 years. Another pause. Chief Callahan submitted a similar statement. "Every member of Bravo team has confirmed that without your actions, they would not have survived. The nuclear material is secured. The terrorist cell is eliminated. By any objective measure, the mission succeeded." Kira felt something shift. Not hope yet, but possibility. However, there are questions. How a former Delta Force operator came to work with terrorists. How he knew we were coming. How atmospheric interference happens every time you receive an order you don't like. He gestured to the JAG officer. "Captain Morrison will debrief you. You will tell him everything. Then we decide what happens next." "Sir," Kira said carefully, "Master Chief Mackenzie told me things about Aldrich, about my mother." Something flickered in Hendricks's eyes. Knowledge. "I know your mother was a hero. What happened in Mogadishu was tragic. What happened to your father afterward was equally tragic. Both events have been investigated thoroughly." Aldrich said, "Aldrich is a ghost," Hendricks interrupted. "A man supposedly dead 10 years. Whatever he told you was psychological warfare to compromise your judgment, which worked because you let him escape instead of taking the shot." Kira's hands clenched. Hendricks turned to leave, then paused. "Get medical treatment. Rest. We'll talk after the debrief." He walked away. The JAG officer, Captain Morrison, stepped forward. Thin, wire-rimmed glasses, the air of someone who'd rather be elsewhere. "Petty officer, we need a formal debrief. But first, you're getting medical attention. You're bleeding on my investigation." Kira looked down. Blood dripped from her fingertips onto the tarmac. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and regret. A corpsman cleaned her head wound. 12 stitches. X-rays confirmed a radial fracture. They put her arm in a cast from knuckles to elbow. "Master Chief Mackenzie," Kira asked. The corpsman hesitated. "Surgery, that's all I know," which meant bad. After medical, Kira was confined to quarters. Not under arrest, but not free. That first night, alone in her bunk, she remembered the notebook. Boone had pressed it into her hand on the mountain, his trembling fingers closing around hers. "Page 17, he'd said, "the truth about your father." She pulled it from her vest pocket. The cover was stained with his blood. Her hands shook as she opened it. Page 17. The handwriting was cramped, written in the field. Dated October 15th, 1993, 12 days after Mogadishu. Accident report for Captain. Nolan Thorne reviewed and endorsed. Equipment failure findings appear sound, but something Aldrich said at the memorial. He smiled when he thought no one was watching. He smiled at Lydia's funeral. I asked him why. He said, "Some questions are better left unasked, Boone. Some truths are better left buried." I didn't understand then. God forgive me, I think I understand now. The next entry was dated November 2nd, 1998. Just signed the accident report for Captain Nolan Thorne. Parachute malfunction at Fort Benning. But Nolan was asking questions. About Lydia, about that day, about Aldrich. He called me 2 days before he died. Said he'd found something. Something about war crimes, civilian casualties, friendly fire, a cover-up. He wanted to meet. I told him to let it go, that it was over, that opening old wounds wouldn't bring Lydia back. He said justice wasn't about bringing people back. It was about honoring them. I never heard from him again, and now he's dead. And I signed the report that says it was an accident. God forgive me. I think I helped kill him. Kira closed the notebook. Her hands were shaking. She spent 2 weeks in limbo. Debriefings. Captain Morrison's 6-hour interview, recording every detail. The shot that violated ROE. The refusal to abandon Boone. The choice not to kill Aldrich. Morrison's report was clinical. Facts without judgment. Presented for the board that would decide her fate. 2 weeks later, she stood before the board. 5 senior officers. Hendricks at center. Captain Morrison presented evidence, violations, timeline, facts. Then witnesses. Boone in a wheelchair. Leg healing. He'd survived surgery. 3 operations to repair the damage. He'd walk again, they said. With a limp, but he'd walk. Callahan at attention. Bravo team operators speaking about the shots that saved them. The board deliberated 2 hours. Finally, they called her back. Hendricks held an unopened folder. His face was unreadable. Petty Officer First Class Kira Thorne. This board has reviewed your actions during Operation Crimson Eagle. We've considered the protocol violations, the insubordination, the refusal to follow direct orders. He opened the folder. We've also considered the results. 12 American lives saved. Nuclear material secured. A terrorist cell destroyed. Successful rescue of a critically wounded teammate against overwhelming odds. He looked up. The finding of this board. While your methods violated protocols, your judgment was sound. Your actions prevented catastrophic loss of American lives. Therefore, you will receive a formal reprimand for the communications violation. This will be in your permanent record. Kira felt her stomach drop. A reprimand could end her career. However, Hendricks continued, you are also awarded the Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry, for exceptional courage under fire and tactical decisions that saved American lives at great personal risk. He stood. The board stood with him. The reprimand will be accompanied by a classified commendation letter stating your actions were taken in the best judgment of a combat operator facing impossible circumstances. Future promotion boards will have access. Hendricks's expression softened slightly. Rules exist for a reason, but so does judgment. You demonstrated both the courage to act and the wisdom to know when rules serve the mission and when they don't. That's the mark of an exceptional operator. He extended his hand. Dismissed. Get back to training. Your team needs you. Outside, Boone waited on crutches, leg wrapped but healing. How'd it go? Reprimand and Silver Star. Boone laughed. Most SEAL thing ever. They punish you and medal you simultaneously. Boone, I need to ask something. His expression turned serious. Aldrich, I've been researching, following the money. He's still out there, still operational. and I think he knows I'm looking. What are you planning? Finding him, getting answers. About Mom, about Dad, all of it. Boone leaned on his crutches. That's not a mission. That's vendetta. Maybe, but it's mine. And when you find him? Kira was quiet. Then, I bring him in, the right way, legal, by the book. Because that's what separates me from him. Boone nodded slowly. You'll need help. Someone who knows how he thinks. When my leg heals, when the doctors clear me, we go after him together. We finish this, but the right way, as a team. Kira felt purpose settle in her chest. Deal. 6 months later, Kira stood on the Coronado sniper range. Morning mist made the world gray and soft. Before her, a young woman lay prone behind a rifle. 22 years old, small, wiry, eyes holding desperate determination Kira remembered from her own early days. The recruit was shaking, breathing too fast, gripping the rifle too tight. I can't find the wind, the recruit said. It's too variable. I'm going to miss. Kira knelt beside her, careful of her healed left arm. The cast was off, full strength returning. Wind isn't your enemy, it's information. Listen to it, feel it, trust your training. The recruit looked at her. What if I fail? Kira thought about a frozen ridge, an impossible shot. Choices made between heartbeats. Then you adjust. Send it again. We don't fail unless we quit. And we don't quit. The recruit breathed, settled, found the respiratory pause. She fired. Downrange, steel rang clear. Perfect hit at 800 meters. The recruit's face lit up. I did it! Boone's voice came from behind. No, you prove you can shoot. Now do it when people shoot back. That's when it matters. He approached, walking without crutches now, just a slight limp. Distinguished Service Medal on his chest. He looked at Kira. Ready? She knew what he was asking. Not about training, about the mission they'd planned for months. Intelligence gathered Marcus Aldrich's location, a compound outside Karachi. But Boone had news. I've been testifying to Congress, he said. Mogadishu cover-ups, war crimes documentation, the things Aldrich buried. It's all coming to light, public hearings, accountability. And Aldrich? Boone smiled. CIA found him, Karachi, just like we thought. But they didn't wait for us. Extradition approved. He's already in custody. Trial starts in 6 months. Kira felt something release in her chest. Not satisfaction, something deeper. Public trial? Public trial. Every secret he buried will be exposed. Your mother, your father, the cover-up, all of it. Justice, Kira. Real justice. She looked back at the range. The young recruit was firing again. Learning, growing, becoming. What about reform? Kira asked. The system that let this happen? Boone pulled out a document, congressional letterhead. The Thorn Protocol, named after your mother. New ROE guidance. If an order violates conscience and could cause unnecessary death, soldiers have a duty to question it. Your mother's legacy, codified, so this never happens again. Kira stared at the document, her mother's name, in black and white, a legacy not of death, but of lives saved, of change, of a system improved. The real mission was never revenge, Boone said quietly. It was making sure the next generation doesn't face what we did. Your mother's legacy isn't her death. It's the lives she saved. Your legacy won't be the shots you took. It'll be the soldiers you train, the system you help fix. The recruit approached. Ma'am, what's next? Kira looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, the determination, the fire. She thought of her mother, running into fire to save lives, of her father, asking dangerous questions, of Boone, carrying guilt across decades until he finally found redemption. And she thought of Aldrich, sitting in a cell, waiting for justice to arrive. The hardest shot isn't the one you take, Kira said. It's knowing when to lower the rifle, when to teach instead of fight, when to build instead of destroy. She smiled. Everything, the whole future is next. 6 months later, the trial began. United States versus Marcus Aldrich. The courtroom at the Eastern District of Virginia was packed. Cameras from every major network, reporters from around the world. The largest military tribunal in decades. The prosecution presented evidence Boone had helped gather, classified documents, witness testimony, the notebook entries, forensic proof of Nolan Thorne's parachute sabotage, audio recordings of Aldrich ordering Lydia forward in Mogadishu. Every secret, every crime, every cover-up exposed to the light. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Leavenworth, maximum security. Kira watched the verdict announcement on TV in the SEAL Team 7 ready room, surrounded by Callahan and the Bravo team operators she'd saved. Boone sat beside her, still using a cane but walking. When the judge read, "Guilty," Boone reached over and squeezed her hand. "Your mother can rest now," he whispered. Kira nodded, but she wasn't thinking about her mother's rest. She was thinking about the young woman on the range outside. The next generation. The ones who would benefit from the Thorne Protocol. Who would never have to make the impossible choice between duty and conscience. That was the real victory. The next morning, Kira was back on the Coronado Range. The young recruit from 6 months ago was there, now training newer recruits herself, the cycle continuing. Kira stood beside her, watching. "Ma'am," the recruit said, "I heard about the verdict, about your mother. I'm sorry." Kira looked at her, at the confidence that had replaced the fear, at the skill that had replaced the doubt. "Don't be sorry," Kira said. "Be ready. The world needs shooters who know when to pull the trigger and when to lower the rifle." She handed the recruit her rifle. "Your turn to teach." Camera pulling back one final time. Coronado Range in golden morning light. Young soldiers training. American flags snapping in the wind. Generations of warriors passing the torch. On Kira's desk in the armory, the 3 photographs remained. But now, a 4th had been added. A courtroom sketch. Marcus Aldrich in handcuffs, head bowed, as the guilty verdict was read. Justice. Finally. Completely. And beneath all 4 photographs, the plaque Boone had given her. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's who we lift up. Kira Thorne, the Reaper's daughter, had lifted an entire generation, and that legacy would endure.